We're John and Amy, and we're the hosts of the Totally Worth It podcast. We love to share stories that from the outside look like sad stories. But when you really hear the stories about the families and the joy and the purpose and the impact that they have, you learn that they're not sad stories.
They're happy stories. And while we're listening to those stories, we can learn how to better serve and better love those in the special needs
All
community.
the stories are going to bring joy and value to your day.
Hopefully make you laugh a little bit.
And welcome to the Totally Worth It podcast.
Have fun.
Welcome to the Totally Worth It podcast. We are on with a special guest, my mama, Karen Slater, who's always been our idea of a guest. We just didn't know when.
This is a tough one to line up. She's pretty busy. it was tough nailing her down.
Way to go to her agent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sophie, her dog.
Yeah.
But you can see where I get my good looks. Not from dad's side, from mom's side. Because people are seeing you on video, you know.
I do. I'm doing my best.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of people that I know, even in our world and community of families with special needs, there's not a lot of people that I know that have lived with a special needs family or more involved with a special needs family than you, because you're a special needs sibling and you're a special needs grandma.
Grandma. That sounds so
Grandma.
Yeah. And so I don't know a lot of people who can speak about it better than you of what that is like living with. So we're going to catch you from several different angles, different perspectives, and we're going to have so much value and benefit, I know, for anybody who hears us.
Watch out, we're about to throw fastballs.
We're about to throw
Oh,
fastballs. So Amy and I have talked a little bit about, in season 1, I don't know, there was an episode or two where we talked about Aunt Nancy. And Aunt Nancy is a huge part of my story and also a part of Amy's story. But for me, I grew up with Aunt Nancy. And I grew up around her and the people that she lived with and the stories. And I've always said that growing up with Aunt Nancy was helping to prepare me to Father Mabry. And Amy got introduced to Nancy several years before Mabry came around, so that helped prepare her as well. And so people who have listened to season 1 may know the name Aunt Nancy. And Aunt Nancy is your sister.
Yes.
And she's a couple years older than you.
15 months.
15 months.
Barely. Yeah, a little over a year.
And so can you just talk about, and be as long-winded or short-winded as you want, because we can edit however we need to, the story of Nancy, her diagnosis, how that came to what it was. And the thing that I'm most interested in out of where this story goes is, what was it like growing up then in a family with special needs? And the reason I'm so interested in this is because as families with special needs now, we think that we have it really bad. We think that we don't do a good job. We think that there's not a lot of resources out there for us. I know a little bit of the story of growing up with Aunt Nancy. And I know that when you fast forward to now, few decades later, we are super lucky with the things that we have, and it looks a lot different now in our households than it probably used to. And it's maybe a generational thing or whatever it may be. So I would love just anyone listening to this to be able to hear what that was like in whatever years that was. Amy and I talked about what years it was, and I don't even know.
I had to tell him what year you were born.
Well, I'm not surprised.
No.
So Nancy was born in a naval hospital in Key West, Florida during World War II. My dad was in the Navy there, and there were lots of babies being born. And my mother had high blood pressure all of her life, even as a young woman. And it spiked so high when she was delivering Nancy that she went into seizures. And that was not something common in her life. It was from this blood pressure during labor and delivery. And during that, oxygen was cut off to Nancy, or certainly lessened. And so that damaged her brain. I didn't know that whole story for many years, but through the years was able to look through her medical records and birth records, and that's what actually happened. My first memories growing up with Nancy are sitting on the potty chairs together in the bathroom. Now, I'm just being honest. So we were very little, and she was still in a diaper and I was still in a diaper. And I'm sure my mother was ready for that change.
Oh my gosh.
So whew, she would put us in the bathroom on these little wooden potty chairs, and we could not go outside and play until we both did our business in the potty chair. True story. And that's how I got my name, Tassa. Nancy couldn't say Karen at this point and called me Tassa for some reason. And the story goes that Mom came in and said, well, are you all ready to go outside? And Nancy said, I didn't poo-poo, but Tassa poo-pooed. And there is my Tassa poo-poo nickname in the family ever since. So I can remember changing her diaper, but she was probably 3 or so at that point. And so we were just a unit. We were so close in age that she and I were always together. You know, we had our room together. We slept in the same bed. We played together. And when we got big enough, I was her companion on the streets. Nancy lived at home until she was 7. And you got to remember, this was in the early 50s. And even in Dallas, Texas, there was nothing for special needs kids. In those days, we called her mentally retarded. And there were state facilities, big schools, residential places, but there was nothing for them during the day. There was nothing like special ed in the schools. There was nothing like a respite program for sure. The choices were you kept them at home or you sent them away. And that's exactly what it was called. And so we tried really hard to keep her at home. And so I can remember as her companion out in the neighborhood, the other kids weren't nice to her. And I was skinny and fragile. She was bigger bone than me. She was always a little bigger than me, but I beat up some of the biggest boys in the neighborhood when they made fun of her. I learned that at an early age. You don't mess with my sister. And so what I find most interesting when I think back about that is that, first of all, we were Catholics, so we didn't go to school with everybody in the neighborhood. We went to Catholic school. And certain families in the neighborhood went to our school, but that was already a mark against us. We had to be cooler than other people because we didn't go to school with them. And so Nancy did not help that situation one bit. And people were unkind to us about that. But in our little neighborhood, there were 2 other families within. One was a block north and one was right behind us that also had special needs kids. So we were friends with those families. And one went to our school and one went to public school, but his sister stayed home. We had help in our house. My mother always had some help, ever since I can remember anyway, taking care of us kids, because there were 4 besides Nancy. And this person's main job was to keep up with Nancy. because Nancy was a runner. And Nancy liked to take all her clothes off before she ran. And so even as a little kid, I remember her, just another story, taking someone's girdle off of a clothesline and putting it on, pulling it up as far as she could, and running down the street. And so the neighbor brought her home that way. So yeah, we had lots of experiences like that, but it was just normal for us. I mean, Nancy's always known she was different, and I don't know if that came from the experience in the neighborhood, but she always knew she was different. And as long as I can remember, she would say, I can't help it, I was born that way. Still says it today. I can't help it, I was born that way. I actually just gave a sermon on that this Sunday because it's a spiritual thing for me to think about. So when Nancy was 7, I started school, first grade, 6 years old. And I remember missing her so bad. I didn't care about not being at home, but I came home saying, can't she go with me? What does she do while I'm gone, you know? And of course she couldn't. But that year, while all of us were at school, someone enticed her into their car. It was a person in our neighborhood, and abducted her and kept her for the day and molested her. I didn't know this either till I was an adult, but that was the turning point. I do remember the police at our house scared me to death, and they were taking a report, and I remember him saying, this guy lived close by and he's watching her. He will be back. They knew it was. And I don't know, I wasn't ever privy to information about what happened to him for doing that. But I just remember my parents talking about that. How were they going to keep her safe? How were they going to have any time outside of their home and still keep her safe? And my dad traveled. He worked on the road all the time. So it was really up to Mom. And that's all I heard about that discussion until probably a year later. And we woke up from our naps, and my mother was sitting in the floor of our bedroom writing Nancy's name in all of her clothes. I'd never seen that before, but I knew that my friends that went to camp all had their names written in their clothes. So I said, are we going to camp? Mom was crying. I never saw my mom cry. But she had everything out from Nancy's winter coat to her bathing suit. I mean, I knew this was everything Nancy had. And she couldn't tell me what she was doing. She just said, you know, go out and play and take your sister with you. So later that day, they picked her up and put her in the car. And my dad couldn't even go. He was so upset. My uncle and my mom took her to the first state school in Texas. And it was devastating to me, devastating. I was not allowed to see her. As I recall, the family could not see her for 6 months. Yeah. And then it was only Mom and Dad. The children were not allowed to see her because she was so young. They thought it would be too hard on her. She couldn't come home for a year. It was horrible. After a year, and my mother was such a devout Catholic. She prayed and all of these Catholic novenas, and she had everybody we knew praying because she didn't think that Denton School was right for Nancy. And that's the only place that she'd been accepted. So for that year, that was going on. And then she was accepted to the Mexia State School, which was further from Dallas, but better suited for Nancy's needs. And so I just remember thinking, in fact, I remember saying, you know, I don't have to go to school. I can stay with her, and I'll teach her. I'll take care of her. Just bring her back. And anyway, it was very, very hard on my parents. And I remember hearing later how they had to go to court and make her a ward of the state. How painful that was. But in those days, those were your choices, and we could not keep her safe. So,
you know, even as I have come to know the story of Nancy and all of that, that's the first time I've ever heard it phrased that way. And John and I have talked before about how we always had, even when Mabry was younger, we had these preconceived notions about people who would send their kids to a group home or a state school or a supported living center like that, and how we would never do anything like that, you know, and how just the older Mabry has gotten, and the harder things that we've been through with her, that we understand. Like, we see how those decisions can be made. And I've really never thought about it in Nancy's situation, that I just never thought about it that way, that it was for her own good, and it was in her best interest.
And the biggest difference between then and now, from what I hear from the story, is now most school districts have a special ed program, to where Mabry started going to school in kindergarten. Things could have been much different for Nancy if she got to go to kindergarten when you did.
It all kind of comes full circle, though, because I can remember, even John and I just celebrated 20 years. So I've known Nancy, 23 years. And I can remember thinking, gosh, who would send their kid away? You know, like, I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And hearing it from that standpoint makes complete sense.
And I picture Mabry and Jack's relationship being very similar to yours and Nancy's relationship. Of course, there's differences, but even if, I mean, now they're 17 and 15. But if they were 7 and 6, how devastated Jack would have been. And how, from a parent perspective, I don't know if you process this as a kid, but from a parent perspective, the rejection that Nancy probably felt when she gets sent there, and she can't see anybody, for her parents for 6 months, and you for a year, and I mean, just the feeling from her, and knowing Nancy, thinking that she probably thought she did something wrong. Because that's how she
exactly.
is.
Exactly. And so what happened after that was, while in Mexia, I'm not sure what the waiting period or adjustment time was, but we would then drive down and get her and bring her home. And I think my brothers would tell you, all of us learned how to drive on the highway between Dallas and Mexia, Texas. And sometimes my grandmother would go. Anyway, it was a pretty frequent thing at first. And she was so thrilled to come home. And it was like a step back into normal for us. And even though our life was really different when she was gone, when she was there, it was like she'd never left. It was so wonderful. And then it would be time to go back. Well, we learned not to let her know when it was time to head back. We would sneak the suitcase out. We would, distract her, because trying to get her in the car to go back, even little, she would not just run, she would wail, "Please don't make me go back. Please let me stay home." It makes me cry just thinking about it right now. It was horrible, and it lasted for years. She did not understand why she couldn't live with us, and I didn't either. And I really hated my parents for a long time about this, when I say, hey, I couldn't talk about it. Because like you, Amy, I didn't get the adult side of it as a kid. So all I could think of was, how could you send her away? And what I learned in my own therapy years later was I decided then that I better be perfect, because we didn't do flawed kids in our house. So every sibling has stuff going on emotionally about this. Hopefully not as traumatic as all that, because things are so much better now. But I'm here to tell you, there are things that go on within them that need to be talked about. I love the way things are now, that young families do talk about stuff with their kids. And we as parents didn't know to do that. When we talk about our feelings, it was a rare thing, right, John? It was a family meeting and everybody rolled eyes and, oh Lord, what is it now? It was not common to say, what's the best part of your day? And so we didn't talk about that kind of stuff. My parents didn't talk about the pain they had with Nancy leaving. They just couldn't talk about it. So we didn't understand.
So I'm sure there was a lot of guilt on your part, even though you didn't make the decision for Nancy to go away, but I'm sure you felt maybe even halfway guilty for being normal. Do you think, you said you didn't talk about it. Did your brothers ever make comments like that they too felt guilty about that, or felt like, or questioned why your parents made that decision?
I don't remember ever talking about it. I talked about that with my best friend. I knew what it did inside me. I couldn't verbalize it without therapy. I mean, I didn't know what all it did to me, but I still felt the pain the whole time. And even as I grew older and understood in terms of the abduction story, I still felt the pain. I still felt, guilty is a big part of it, I think. And it was like the better I did in school and the more awards that I got and all that kind of stuff, the worse I felt about that.
Wow.
I thought about her all the time. And we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have any way of communicating. She lived in a barracks, an old army barracks, with lots of other girls. So there was very little communication. On the average, I was thinking about it, we saw each other probably 3 times a year most of our childhood, for about a week. Yeah.
When was the transitioning point from you being her sister to you being her caregiver? Or were you always, I mean, we always say that Jack's a little bit of that he's a lot of a caretaker, but they're still siblings at this point. At one point with you, did you kind of take over that role?
It was very specific. When I was a junior in high school, my dad had a massive heart attack. And really, for the next 11 years, he never worked full-time again. He was having heart attacks or strokes or different health issues. When that first one happened, probably a few months after he was home recovering, my mother talked to me about taking more responsibility for Nancy. I was able to drive then, so I could go by myself and pick her up. I never went by myself. I took a friend or brother or somebody, but she had her hands full with Dad. And eventually she talked to me about going in front of the court and making that legal guardianship. And so I did that as soon as I turned 18. And so I've been her legal guardian all that time. However, as long as Mom was alive, she made all the decisions. I know she needed to have that in place before she died. It's funny because she took care of that, but never wrote a will for herself, you know. But she knew that I would take care of Nancy. And so she got that in place. And I was already doing it. While Mom was alive, my brothers would sometimes go with us, or sometimes if there was a decision to make about her, we would all come together. But as we became adults, they all lived out of town. So it was just natural, if it hadn't already been happening, that I be the one that takes care of her. And so she was just part of my package. I had 3 kids and Nancy. And
do you think you harbored any resentment for that, of having that responsibility at such a young age?
Not at the time. I didn't know what a load that was. I mean, to me, as long as Mom was alive, I really wasn't responsible for the decisions. That's the hardest part.
Yeah.
You know, the taking care of her and making sure she's getting medical care and clothing and all that is the easy part. But to make decisions, as you know, for someone who can't make those for themselves is a big load. And so my mom died in 95. And so from then on, I have made those decisions. I had a lot of people that really depended on me for a long time, and I was young. So probably in my 30s and 40s was the hardest part. You're kind of in that stage now where those other parents, not me, are getting older. And so you think about that and care about, you know, taking them to the hospital and things like that, plus your own, plus each other's. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing. We didn't know what a village was.
Yeah.
We didn't know that, and we didn't have that. So
my earliest memories, and I couldn't even say that Nancy was in this memory, but I have very early memories of going to Mejia.
Yeah.
And I can even picture in my mind what the waiting room looked like, or, you know, and it was horrible. And I don't remember much past that, but I remember going back and forth to Mejia a couple times. But my whole childhood, what I saw from the kid growing up is that I knew that at every holiday we were going to have Aunt Nancy, and that was just a part of it. That was almost like having your sister coming home from college, was Aunt Nancy coming home for Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And in the majority, you know, through my mid-teenage years, it would be your mom bringing her. So Baby Helen is what we call her. And so everything was a package with Aunt Nancy and Baby Helen.
Right.
And Baby Helen would go get her at either Mejia or at her group home or wherever she was. Usually she would stay at Baby Helen's house.
Yes.
We would go over there on some holidays. They would come over to our house on some holidays, but they were kind of a package deal to me. You didn't see, your dad had already passed by that time. So they were the package deal at that time. And then when Baby Helen passed, I was a senior in high school, maybe a junior in high school. And so I remember everything past that, which was still a lot, and it's still today, of you and Nancy being a package. And that's when we really got more involved, because first off, I was no longer a punk teenager, and I actually took on some responsibility.
Thank the Lord.
And then we would help go pick up Nancy, and we would take her places, and the package became you and her. And so I'm interested to know, when Baby Helen was around and after, you and Nancy went through your adulthood together. And y'all were, of course, going through different things. You were married with kids or doing your own thing. And what challenges did you have trying to prioritize taking care of her and helping her live out the best adulthood that she could while still managing yours. Where did it get really challenged, and what burdens were there? Just what did you see during that time?
I think the thing that catches me in that question is the concept of having her living her best life as a priority. I have to tell you, that was not in our scope of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That was not talked about. That was not written about. It was how to keep her housed and fed and clothed and with her family when possible.
Mm-hmm.
There was no purpose to her life. That is what touches me now so about the work that you all do and so many others. She has a great purpose in her life. And those of us that know her know that. But we didn't know it as young adults for sure. And she's never known it.
Mm-hmm.
She's got her own personality and she brings that with her, and that's who she is. But there's never been anything done to help her develop any of her gifts. And so it was a matter of, do I go to the group home today, or do I go to the nursing home and see my dad, or do I go over here for my mother-in-law? It was job priorities.
Mm-hmm.
It was job priorities. And yet I always had that passion about, you better take good care of her when I'm not here, so it was constant checking up, or my mother did that a lot, but certainly after she was gone, making sure that she had good care, because I wasn't there every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was never good enough, I can tell you that.
And the encouragement that we have in the times that we're in is that there's a lot of opportunities for kids and adults with special needs to live out their joy and purpose. And families are now making it more of a priority, because
Yes.
we know that they didn't used to. And that's not a slight on anybody. That was just the thing then.
Yeah.
There weren't opportunities anyway, just like they didn't have special ed in kindergarten. There weren't those opportunities. The other encouraging thing is we here know Nancy really well, and we know exactly what she was doing in the group home that she was in, or at the work, wherever she was that day. And we know that she had a great purpose and was impacting those people that she was with.
Yeah.
We wish that we did a better job at getting her in front of other people. That's what we could have done, is get her in front of more people that we do now, and live in a bigger community than these 5 people.
Right.
But I bet she felt her purpose. She felt the impact that she had.
Yeah. She couldn't put words to that, but she's always felt good about her existence. She's got that innocence that we all come into this world with, and she hasn't, the brokenness of the world has not touched her. She still thinks she's beautiful and young, and you must have a problem because she doesn't.
That is one of my favorite things about Nancy, is we joke that she's going to outlive all of us.
Oh,
because
I think maybe.
she doesn't have a care in the world. Now, I preface that by saying, like, she gets mad about stuff.
Oh yeah.
And this one can rev her up.
Oh yeah.
More than most. But it's all in a really playful demeanor. Do you think, like, on a day-to-day basis, she knows stress? Like, does she know stress, or does she feel that in her group setting, which now is a nursing home, because that's the best care, that we could find for her?
Yeah.
Do you think she feels that, or do you think she feels completely cared for and loved? And
I think really probably for the first time in her life, she has a lot less stress. in both the state school and the group home setting, she had a lot of worry about other people getting her things.
Right.
Because in those places, it's hard to keep up with that. I guess it's the difference between, the age group. I mean, she's the young whippersnapper in the nursing home for the most part, and those people don't care a thing about her things. And so she has now she worries when her clothes go to the laundry, because she's not happy till they come back. So there's still that, and that is so grounded in truth, because when we would go down to pick her up from the state school, we would see the new outfit that we just bought her on somebody else going down the hall. So they really did, have trouble keeping all that straight. So she has that to this day, but I would not say she has stress. Nancy gets anxious about things, but can be redirected immediately, can be pacified with a simple explanation. She doesn't hang on to it like we do.
Yeah.
So
that's good. I said one of my favorite things is her demeanor, but also I love the fact that in our family, with Nancy and with Mabry, we will always celebrate Santa Claus. We will always celebrate the Easter Bunny. And that's just really special.
It's a very special thing.
That childlike excitement
Yes.
will always be there. And that's really, really special.
All right, so let's shift gears to you being a special needs grandmother. Tell us about that perspective, what you see, what you're challenged with, what hurts, what you love, what you've learned that you didn't see all these years of being a special needs sibling. Give us a perspective of now what? Now what do you see?
Mostly I'm filled with gratitude and joy as I watch Mabry grow up. I can tell you honestly, when way before we got the diagnosis, I guess, but when I realized that there were serious issues going on, it broke my heart. It broke my heart for you all, because I know that every parent wants the dream for their kids, and they think they know what that is. And I knew at whatever age that you all would have this love, this angel in your life, and probably in your home the rest of your life. And that is a true joy and a true blessing and a true worry. And just if you can put yourself in those shoes, that could happen to Jack or Slater down the line. And it's not what you want for your child, because you want an easier road for them than what you had. It never had anything to do with Mabry. It had to do with what I knew was ahead for you all. She was perfect. I knew that. And I learned that from Nancy. That certainly was not the train of thought of the culture when we were growing up, but I knew she was perfect just the way she was. And she would tell you that if you asked, And so I never grieved about Mabry. I grieved for you guys. And for Jack, when I saw his sweet, sweet spirit, just from the very beginning, when he was so little, he wanted to take care of his sister. And being younger than her, that was unusual, but he knew. And she knew immediately how much he loved her. So to watch your family and think about what it was like at my house has been a great joy for me. And the more that I'm around all of you or involved in anything having to do with your work, I'm just so grateful. We don't have a clue what's going to happen in our family. We don't have a clue. And to me, that is a blessing in a lot of ways. It is so hard. And honest goodness, I don't know how you all do every single day. I do know how, but it's not easy. And the work that you do to put that message out for other parents is God's gift to this old lady before she goes. I could die happy tomorrow. I don't plan to, but really, to see your children take that was called a burden in my day and make it their life work. What else could a mother want? Really. So I'm doubly blessed by having those two in my life, and everyone in our family is. And I think everyone would say that. And everyone that knows them.
And if anybody wants to come over for Thanksgiving, it is a blast.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much fun. We play What's in Nancy's Purse. That's always
which would be her teeth and her hearing aid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a giant
and many other
lotion.
things.
Well,
yeah.
The Costco size lotion.
And pictures of her boyfriend. All of that. Yeah.
Yes. And so it really is so much fun. We laugh so hard around a Thanksgiving table when, sometimes holidays are stressful. Well, a lot of times holidays are stressful for people. And I just love how Nancy just kind of puts everything in perspective, because she'll get on to John about his hairy legs, and it'll just go from there. And it's so fun. It is just, it allows us just to, so totally worth it, viewers. Here's your formal invitation to Thanksgiving.
I think we just need to put a live stream on our Thanksgiving table.
We really should. Because people wouldn't believe it.
We have Mabry sit right next to Nancy, and Nancy doesn't like people invading her personal space, and Mabry just sits there like this.
Those two together, and trying to sneak some green beans onto Nancy's plate is another game. Yeah. So it's a ton of fun, and
it is. And the other thing that is God is those two knew each other in a deep way right away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to have language between them. They don't have to, they know each other. And to me, to have that in a family is wonderful. I mean, they have that now in their special ed classes. They have, people like them, but Nancy has not had that. And certainly in the family, it makes them both, I think, more a part of things, of things, even though they're not all that crazy about being next to each other sometimes. Yeah.
No. It's kind of like Mabry's love for Santa Claus. She loves him from a distance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and let's face it, when Nancy's around, nobody else gets much attention.
Mm-hmm.
Until it's nap time.
Yeah. That's right.
I always like to ask, what is something, it can be a piece of technology, or it can be, I don't know, clothing or a food or something like that, just a product or invention, or...
You haven't even asked the question yet.
I know. What has been a game changer for you? What is something here recently that you have discovered that has changed the game?
Made you happy?
Yeah.
Or life easier? You got a new TV show you're into?
Oh, I love all the, really mushy ones where they all make love all over the hospital and all that. Okay.
What? I don't even know that show.
Amy knows.
Grey's Anatomy.
Yes. So, the first thing that comes to mind because of this crazy pandemic time is definitely technology. Mm-hmm. And where it frustrates me and makes me feel like a really old dinosaur, that's the only way I can even be with Nancy. This would be the longest we have well, it is the longest we have not seen each other in our adult lives, for a very, very long time. And I know how hard it is on her because she talks about it every day. But it is so hard for me too. Not because I'm worried that she's not being attended to, because I feel really good about her care right now, but I miss her. I just miss her. And we can't talk on the phone anymore because neither one of us can hear. I hear a whole lot better than she does, by the way.
Yeah.
But we all know that she yells. So I have an advantage. She can't hear thunder. And her hearing aid is usually in her purse. So talking on the phone is not so good anymore. We used to do that a lot in between visits, but we can FaceTime. And if you've never FaceTime with Nancy, you've never lived. She cannot figure out how I'm in that picture. And she gets up just like this. The first time she said, I can see your teeth.
So funny.
That is a true joy. And they know, in fact, she's called me on FaceTime since we've been talking. It's about this time of day that she likes to.
You should bring her on.
FaceTime.
Bring her on and turn it around. Oh my gosh, that would be funny.
That would be pretty funny. Well, it's already gone now. But she would, she still has help hearing everything I say on FaceTime, but seeing my face, I guess she reads lips a little bit. We do a whole lot better. And it's always the same thing. When you coming to get me?
And you say, after I'm done with work.
After I'm off work. She must think I have a horrible job. And they have, tried to explain to her about the virus, and, that makes no sense. And because she's not sick, and she'll tell you she feels fine. She's not wearing that mask, by the way. And so what do you do with that? So I'm just grateful that they are keeping her safe and that they're as strict as they are, because they don't let anybody in there that's not essential to her care. Yeah. So
one thing that you said that I think you just said it a while ago. That's a Texas thing. Is you said her care is really good for now. And I think that's so important because it kind of sums up what special needs parents and special needs sisters and everything is, that there's no sitting back on our heels, and there's no, you have to be diligent and you have to be intentional in, checking on things constantly. Because it does, just when Mabry did so great all through this pandemic. And then 3 weeks before school started, she started acting the fool and getting aggressive and doing, so just when you think things are good, you sit back a little bit and you're like, ugh. So that's just one of those reminders to maybe someone who's not in the special needs world, just to remind to give a little grace to families, and that they have to always be on, there's no sitting back.
And y'all are too young to know this, but you go through the same thing when you're taking care of a relative, usually a parent, who's become unable to have their own voice in one way or another. When you get to that point, you understand a little more the families that you just described. But you all have had that for a long time in your life, and it's the same thing. It's that constant fear that someone's not going to be cared for in the right way. And when you think someone is taking advantage of one of those people, you become crazy. Absolutely not a nice person. And it's okay.
That's right.
It's okay.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you
for this. I've learned a lot. And I know a lot of other families are going to hear things that they're encouraged by and things that are going to open their eyes because they had no idea what it was like in the 50s and how far we've come.
In the black and white days.
I mean, at least y'all weren't seeing in color, so that helped, right? That's what our kids think.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
But no, I mean, it's so valuable, and seeing the perspective from both the sibling who was that close, like a best friend, and a grandparent. And I know we count on you a lot for your ideas and your support. So thank you for being on.
I love y'all. Thank you for having me. It was so wonderful. I hadn't even thought about those questions. You know, I don't think of myself as that dual role, but yeah, I guess it is unique and a blessing for our family. So thank you for letting me talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we love you. Thank you.
Love you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Wasn't I amazing? I think that was my best one yet.
Whatever is the easiest way for you to find us, podcast or YouTube, just subscribe.
Just come knock on the door. You can do that too.
Have dinner with us. You can take Mabry with you.
If you're nice, go ahead and leave us a review also.
Leave us a review. You never know. You might just get it in front of somebody that really needed to hear the message.
But if you're going to be mean, just private message us.
Actually, don't message us at all.
Go on. Go on. Get out of here. We don't need you.
Thank you for watching and listening to the Totally Worth It podcast. We appreciate you.